Hey guys, it's Ethan from Zimmer Labs, here to do a video of this Dooku that I just finished for Rob. This is an Ultimate Works Pock Store hilt. I did the usual Teensysaber installation with neopixel string blade. There is quite a bit to show you guys with this one, but no crystal chamber because there just isn't any room in there. If I were to sacrifice a few things, it's possible I could have squeezed a really small crystal chamber in, but I didn't want to do that. So let's get into it. To begin with, this is a really highly polished stainless steel hilt. It's got a really good weight to it and just excellent overall build quality. It's got rubber grips here and here that have actually had some negative feedback about them being not real rugged, not lasting all that well, but they seem to be really good quality to me. They're 3M, and they do actually give you a backup set when you get the hilt, so if you have trouble with the grips, you can always just replace them with the backups. But I wouldn't imagine the grips are going to be an issue. The other thing is that because it's 3M, it's probably something that is replaceable. I would imagine that you can order this rubber grip tape and then just cut pieces to fit if you did go through both sets of grips. To begin with, let me get actually a tool here. Doing videos with these white gloves is great because you don't have to worry about scratching or getting fingerprints on the shiny hilts while we do videos, but I don't have the ability to do much of anything with these. There's zero grip. So this is the cover tech knob here. Inside is your recharge port. This is your kill key. Now what I did was I put it in there and shaped it so that it's a switch. So the idea here is you don't have to remove the kill key unless you want to recharge it. You simply twist it until it gets to the sweet spot. Which is pretty easy if you can feel what you're doing, but obviously not as easy if you can't. I think that's it. There we go. So now that's on. To turn it back off, you simply twist that again and the main power is shut off. This guy comes with your buttons already done, which is great. We have a button in both of these gold buttons here. This is your auxiliary and this is your activation, and they're really nicely done. Fire it up for you guys. Got a nice Vader Return of the Jedi style blade plug in there, which I think is my favorite for a Dooku hilt. It just looks good. It kind of goes with it, you know. It's neopixel blade plug so that it lights up. It also does all the effects. And to remove that blade plug, it's a 2mm Allen screw right under here. Just loosen it a tiny bit, not much to it. She slides right out. And what I did was I actually mounted some pixels right to the blade connector for this guy, so that this is just a non-electronic, hollow metal and plastic blade plug, nothing crazy going on inside of this piece. Now, as you see, there are a few set screws running down here. This top one is the blade set screw. And then this guy is a set screw that locks the blade connector in place, so you don't need to mess with that. And this one down here is the set screw that locks the bottom half of the hilt on, so you don't need to mess with that one either unless you want to take the bottom half of the hilt off. Before we get to that, want to show you guys what I did with the speaker. The speaker is underneath this section. This is a 3mm Allen screw, which I put on really tightly. Doesn't need to be that tight. Just loosen it a few turns, and this section slides right off. Now for this build, I went with this 25, I believe. It's either 25 or 26, but it's a 25mm mid-woofer that is actually rated at 8 ohms, which is kind of counterintuitive. It seems like it wouldn't be very loud, but it's a 1 watt, 8 ohm speaker, and this thing sounds so incredible in this, it's not even funny. And I know obviously you can't really tell on the video, but super clean, super loud. It gets the highs, it gets the lows. And it's mounted right there to the end so that the audio comes right out of these sound ports at the bottom. Now, when I was doing this, I initially went with a 22mm speaker from Vico that I just got from the Custom Saber shop, and it actually sounded terrible. So what I did was I actually went through every single possible speaker that I had in inventory that would fit in this Saber, and ended up deciding on that guy. This is the original speaker that I went with. This is a brand new guy that the Custom Saber shop just started carrying. 22mm Vico 4 ohm 3 watt, very nice speaker. But for whatever reason it sounded terrible in this build. So next up I tried the 20mm Custom Saber shop Vico speaker. This just had no volume. Next I went to this 20mm midwoofer that I have, that I got special made through AliExpress. It was better but not great. I stepped up next to this super low profile thin midwoofer that's 24mm that I use in a lot of things. That sounds really good in Luke Return of the Jedi. Just didn't do it in this one. I then went to this 28mm 8 ohm 2 watt job, which is, this is a big speaker. This guy is almost as big as you can get into a lightsaber. And then lastly I tried out standard 28mm Vico bass speaker, and all of them just sounded subpar compared to this guy. This guy is a night and day difference. So I'm not saying for every application this is the speaker to use, but if you're doing a Dooku build, as far as I can tell, it's absolutely the ultimate speaker. Now, next up, let's see. I think probably the part that I am most happy with is the internals. Now, we've got here's a set screw loosening up real quickly, and then the pieces just slide apart. Inside here we've got, not sure if you guys could see that real well, there's a good angle. We've got your access to SD card on top, USB in the middle, and then the bottom there is a 18 prong female connector, which mates with this guy on the other side, which is the male connector side, and this guy literally just slides in like butter and you lock it down. See how well that works? Pull it apart and power disconnects, because for obvious reasons you've got your recharge port and kill key down here, so that means that the power is not going to the board right now because this is off. That was a problem for this build, so I had to work around it, but at the end of the day this really worked out well. Those of you who are tech savvy probably already know what that is. That's an HDMI cable. It's definitely the first time I have ever used an HDMI, but for this build it was perfect. What I did was I used the Shtok Custom Worx Dooku chassis. That's what that guy is, and the shape of the chassis itself, as well as the cutouts that were already in it, lend itself perfectly to an HDMI connector. And HDMI connectors have, I think, 18 data lines in them, so you can get a ton of different data and different lines connected with one connector, which is good because in this half of the hilt we have 2 switches, speaker, recharge port, kill key, so that's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 wires that need to go from this side to the other side. And as you might imagine, if you had 10 wires going from here to here, every time you open this up, it'd be 10 wires connecting these two and trying to break every single time or get jumbled up or twisted or whatever. So connector is obviously the solution here. The problem is, what connector connects 10 different inputs? So I racked my brain, I tried a bunch of different things, but at the end of the day, HDMI was by far the best way to go. And it's been really good. It's been very reliable. It fits really well. No issues of any kind. I will show you guys the internal chassis because it's totally modular. But before we get to that, I'm going to fire it up and show you guys how it performs. So, simple matter of putting the two halves back together and then tightening the set screw, and she's back together. Now, let's install the blade, loosen this set screw, pull the blade plug, and here is the blade. What I did on this guy, this is your standard pogo pin style blade connector, and then this metal sheath on the end of the blade is actually 1/2 of the LED slash blade holder that came with the saber itself. Those of you guys who have any experience with this saber know that along with it came a probably 1.5 to 2 inch round Luxion LED holder slash blade connector that was supposed to be mounted here so you could just slide the blade in and out. But when I went with neopixels on this guy, this blade does not slide in and out of this metal thing very easily at all. It's incredibly tight fit, and this blade also does not fit in the hilt without that because the size is just all wrong. So rather than fight with it, I decided to cut the blade holder slash LED holder in half and turn it into a blade adapter and a neopixel connector holder. So that's kind of where I went with that. And actually, before we do this, I'll show you guys how that works inside. You can see it like a trim ring around the connector. That silver ring that's running around the connector, that's the other half of that. And I cut it off right there and then just permanently attached this metal adapter to the blade. Now everything works like butter, much better. Crank this guy down a tiny bit, and so that's your first blade. Is a bright red with a white flash with a nice fast ignition, slow retraction. That's Swarm sound font, which is one of my absolute favorite Sith fonts. Next up, this is one of the 2 Dooku fonts that's on here. This is a bright red but pulsing blade. And it's got some excellent force effects. I try to get all my blades to have their own unique force effects. Sometimes it's harder to do than others, but If you hold the power button for a second and then release,
I've become more powerful than any Jedi.
you get some really good Dooku quotes.
It is obvious that this contest cannot be decided by our knowledge of the Force, but by our skills with a lightsaber.
The other excellent part is, when you run a Force quote like that, the smooth swing effect will work right over it, so you don't just lose all your sound effects.
I've been looking forward to this.
Next up, we've got... It's a spark tip red blade with another Dooku font.
It is obvious that this contest cannot be decided by our knowledge of the Force, but by our skills with a lightsaber.
Fourth blade. Nice red fire blade with a K-Sith crossguard sound font. Fifth blade. This is Nagtooth Sith's Stress Fire Blade. I really like this guy. It's a random per LED flicker red blade. And that's running the Durin Fire sound font. Next up, we've got a Sith Seizure Blade. This is audio flicker red and yellow with Desolation sound font. This is the Blood Orange Blade with Sigil sound font. With a custom smooth swing sound added to it that's totally unique. And what it is actually Frederick's Teensy sound font smooth swing effect. And we've got the red Tron blade, of course. Nice bright yellow spark tip Corran Horn blade, Corran Horn sound font. Nice slow retraction on that guy. And this is... I don't remember which blade this is. I think this is also a audio flicker blade, but done in some different colors. This is the Jedi Seizure Blade. It's got RGB effect built into it, the Desolation sound font. Strobe blade. POV blade. Rainbow blade because, well, it's kind of funny. Count Dooku's such an evil badass that he really probably did have a fruity side where he liked to play with rainbow blades, but it's a separate issue. Battery meter blade, showing that the battery is probably down to around 3.9 or 4 volts, so it does need a recharge before she goes out the door. And back to the beginning again. last thing to show you guys. The modular side of this might be my favorite part about this. So one screw to take the bottom off, one screw to take the blade out, one screw to take the connector chassis out, although I'm not sure there's a real easy way to do this, but yeah, just some thin needle nose pliers. This guy pops off. It's on a round header pin connector, custom one that I built. And here's the other half of that LED and blade holder that I was talking about earlier. Now, simple matter of pressing here, slides right out. And here is the internal components that powers the saber. This is the Shtok Custom Worx chassis that I mentioned. We've got one steel pin here holding the sound card in place. 18650 battery, neopixel blade connector here. And then what I did was I put a micro switch in right here. You do that, and now we've got power again. And that is the solution to the fact that we have no power in this saber once the bottom half of the hilt is removed. Just a simple switch, really tiny little switch that is almost impossible to even see, but right there, there's your female end of the HDMI connector. HDMI, USB for programming the Teensy, SD card access right there, and a couple 3mm red LEDs for fun. They're just set on a mild pulse. And it's that simple to access the internal components of this guy. And this is really quite small. This is essentially the whole thing, shrunk down into a very small form factor. Now putting it back together, it's simply the reverse process. Slide this guy in, making sure your orientation is correct. So the HDMI is on the bottom. Press it in as far as it goes. It doesn't take a lot of pressing. It's pretty easy. Slide this connector in. Then you slide the trim ring over that holds that connector in place. Lock that down. Pop this guy back in place. Lock that down. Boom. You're all done. Just got to make sure to remember that when you do that, you turn that little micro switch off, which I didn't. So glad I said that. If you don't turn that micro switch off, then the kill key is not going to work, and the battery is just going to sit there and run itself dead. So simple as that. All of that being said, it's not probably something you're gonna need to use a lot, because there's not going to be a whole lot of situations where you need to access that internal component, but if you need to, you can do it, and it's got power. Yeah, that's about it. That's about it. Thank you guys for watching, and Rob, I hope you like it. Let me know. Give me your thoughts, and if there's any changes you want done before I send her out, happy to do that. Thanks you guys for watching.